Hey guys, I'm out here on the front porch again. We're going to read chapter 5 of Marvin Redpost, class president. And here's Millie. She's doing such a good job being a student and reading. And there's Waco, and he's doing the same thing. And if you look closely, there's some chickens in the yard. And you know you get to hear them. And then it's kind of hard to see because of the bright glare. But then there's also the neighbors' cows. So, let's read Marvin Redpost, class president, chapter 5. Sorry for that view. Okay. More news people came from other TV stations. They all crowded into the back of the room. There were 3 television cameras and a photographer from a newspaper. Mrs. North went ahead with the arithmetic lesson, and we talked about that. Remember, that's math. They'd been learning to add big numbers. Miss North put a problem on the board. She said the number out loud: 63,880,227 plus 17,116,547. Mrs. Marvin's mouth dropped open. He had never heard anyone add such big numbers. "Marvin," said Miss North, "would you like to come to the board and give us an answer?" He closed his mouth. Then he stood up and made his way to the board. Let me see if I can make that where you can see better. Oh, there you go. Okay. He looked at the problem. It was impossible. Miss North gave him a "you can do it" smile. He looked at all the people at the back of the room. They were watching him. 3 television cameras were pointed at him. He looked back at the problem. Just add up like smaller numbers," Miss North gave a gentle reminder. "Start at the ones column." He stared blankly at the board. 7 plus 7, said Miss North. His brain had turned off. "Don't think about the cameras," said Miss North. 7 plus 7, Marvin." Marvin looked around helplessly. Casey Happleton, remember, she's the ponytail girl, was making funny faces at him. She stretched her mouth in different directions. He thought she was making fun of him. So there's Casey right here. Then he realized her mouth was forming the words 14, 14 over and over again. 14, he said. "Good," said Miss North. He wrote the number 4 and carried the 1. His brain started working again. 2 plus 4 is 6, plus 1 is 7. He put his 7 in the next column. He carefully went through the problem one step at a time. So he had a huge number to add. He was almost finished when there was a knock at the door. Mr. McCabe, the principal, opened the door. "Excuse me, do you mind if we come in?" Another man was with him. Remember who's supposed to come? Marvin was pretty sure the other man was a president. Mrs. North said, "Welcome." She wiggled her hand behind her back, signaling the class to stand. Marvin was already standing, but he stood straighter. Everyone clapped as the other man walked into the room. "Thank you," he said. "Please sit down." Marvin didn't know what to do. He didn't want to disobey the president, but he had been standing before the president came in. "This is Mrs. North," said Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe wore a long-sleeved shirt. Remember, he's the principal. Remember, it was whole day. He had a hole over his pink and bony elbow. "I've heard wonderful things about you," said the president. He shook Mrs. North's hand. Marvin couldn't believe that his teacher was really shaking hands with the president. "Thank you," said Miss North. "I've heard, we're delighted you're here." The president turned back and looked at Marvin. "Those are big numbers," he said. Marvin didn't know what to say. "Did you add those numbers by yourself?" "It's not finished," said Marvin. The president smiled. "Well, go ahead, finish." Marvin took a breath and exhaled and looked back at the problem on the board. He had lost his place. He had to start back at the beginning and add the numbers in his head. He finished the problem. The president looked over. "What's your name?" he asked. There's a chicken, guys. Marvin's brain had turned off again, but then it came back. Marvin Red Post. Good job, Marvin, said the president. He held out his hand. Marvin shook hands with the president. Oh, see? And see, Millie's working on being such a good reading dog that maybe we can have her at the school some when we get back. Bye, guys.